moving on to My Adventure with Superman. Uh, so the best, I've said this 1,000 times, the best part of the show, by a long shot, is the relationship between Lois, Clark, and Jimmy. And in episode 7, exemplifies this with the extremely cute moment between them reintroducing themselves at the beginning when he took them to his parents' farm and showed them the ship. Um, and he asks her out on a date and kisses her. That was cute, a very cute moment for between Clark and Lois. And Jimmy being completely comfortable being the third wheel as long as they continue to respect and value him and not ignore him like they did last time. And
Right.
he always is just butting out when he notices stuff. He's like, all right, let me get out of here and not be a third wheel. Jimmy's great.
It was great.
Um, but yeah, and also in this episode we got the silliest lad, Mister Mixia Spitlick, which if
Yes.
you were to just see that name written down, you would not know how to spell it. I mean pronounce it. The
Yeah.
reason I know how to pronounce it is because in Superman the Anime Series, he is voiced by the late and great, may he rest in peace, Guilford Godfrey.
Ah.
And he's so good as Mr. Mixie Spitlet, and like Superman mispronounces it, and then Mixie Spitlick essentially he like sounds it out, and he goes Mix Yiz Spitlick, and ever since then I've been able to say his name properly, Mixie Spitlick. But I'm gonna listen to spoiler because this is just basic knowledge when it comes to Mixie Spitlick. But you actually usually in other versions except this one to quote unquote defeat him, you have to say his name backwards, which is Kaltipsy Zip, which is much easier to say than Michi Spitlick. But
Mm-hmm.
and Superman anime series episode with Mystic Spitlick is great. And how Superman very cleverly convinces him to you have to convince him to say his name backwards. And Superman always finds a clever way to convince him, Mixie, to say his name backwards, and it's great. Um, but in this one, you just have to take his hat, which
Ah.
his hat being a little bowler hat is a reference to his original design, which he's like this little dude in like this purple and yellow suit with his little bowler hat. It's a great design, and some people didn't like his design in this show, and I know I've been talking trash about a lot of the villain design in this one, but this is one I don't have a problem with. But I'm biased because it's very much inspired by Akira Toriyama and Dragon Ball Z, and I love Dragon Ball Z. So I was just like, I'm okay with this. This is a good redesign of the character, especially since he kind of looks like some of the godly beings in Dragon Ball Z, like the Kais and stuff like that. And in
Right.
this, he's meant to be a god of chaos. Whereas he usually is a what they call a fifth dimensional imp. So he's like this otherworldly being with all this like powerful like magic or whatever. And yet, but in this one, he's just like a god of chaos, which could lead to a Doctor Fate cameo in the future because Doctor Fate is a servant of the gods of order, and he fights against the people who work for the gods of chaos. And it
Right.
seems like Mixer Spitlick is either a god of chaos or he works for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get Doctor Fate in this because Doctor Fate also makes a cameo in the '90s Superman animated series. So they might be following suit with that. And we get a whole room full of Easter eggs of other DC villains when Mixie goes to steal the tape recorder, and you see a bunch of different artifacts in that room. All of those are
Mm-hmm.
from DC characters, DC heroes
Yep.
specifically. You see like Doctor Fate's helmet, of course, which leads even into even more credence that he might show up in the show in a season or two.
Mm.
I wouldn't be surprised the next time we see Mixie is probably going to be when we see Doctor Fate, probably sometime in season 2. You see
Nice.
Starman and Stargirl's cosmic staff. You see Mr. Terrific's T spheres. What else did we have? I wrote them down, but I'm having a hard time finding it for some reason. Okay, yeah, we also see a Legion of Superheroes flight ring. And yeah, so I feel like we're definitely going to see, I think we're probably going to see every single hero that is teased in there, or almost all of them, at least the ones I just named. But one, other than Mr. Dr. Fate, another one, another one that I'm almost certain we'll see is the Legion of Superheroes. Because Legion of Superheroes are tied kind of directly to Superman. And
Right.
uh, like there's always a Legion of Superheroes arc and Superman related content. So we're probably going to see the Legion of Superheroes, which is a
Mm-hmm.
team of superheroes from the far future in the DC universe.
Ooh.
And they all can fly because they have this thing called the Legion Flight Ring, which they use to give everyone the ability to fly. Um,
Dope. That's dope.
but yeah, I completely, not on purpose, but just saving it for the end for this episode discussion, glance over the League of Loises, I believe is what they're called, which is
Mm.
a very fun concept. And it's stuff like
Great.
this that makes me excited for the future of the show. I have my complaints, but they're minor in comparison to just how much I really do like this show, and I can't wait to see other DC characters like I just named that aren't villains show up in the show and how they what their take on these characters are. And without spoiling it, because they probably will bring it up in some form or fashion, so I don't want to give this away.
Right.
Nightwing originally got his name from a story that Superman told him about Krypton, and I'm gonna be very nondescript about that story. But it also involves Flamebird, and I meant to mention this before. And Flamebird is, of course, the name of Jimmy's social media, and that will probably come back in a major way later on.
Ooh,
and not
exciting.
and not just because what happened at the very end of the last episode, which we'll talk about at the very end of this segment.
Right.
So Flamebird is going to come back in a very big way, probably at some point in this series, and that's going to be cool, especially with the introduction of the multiverse, which could result in some really cool stuff in the future, and most likely a battle between an evil Superman.
Mm.
But yeah, what do you think about episode 7?
I liked it. The words are failing me. The League of Lois's had gotten spoiled for me, actually. Because people on Twitter were like talking about it and they weren't very happy about it, but I thought it was a pretty cool concept.
People find stupid stuff to complain about. Like, there's a lot of stuff that people like. Everybody complaining about the villains. I agree with them, but all the other stuff is stupid.
Yeah, and they were like, "Oh, this is dumb," blah 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 blah. But I thought it was, I thought it was neat, and I thought it was like just silly enough that it was like enjoyable. But
like,
yeah, I enjoyed this episode.
A lot of people are annoyed with the multiverse, and I feel the same way about the multiverse that I feel about quote unquote comic book fatigue. Comic book fatigue isn't real. We have genre fatigue, which is we're tired of comic book movies being just action comedies or action dramas. And essentially, especially Marvel, doing the same thing with every movie over and over and over. We're not tired of comic book characters and superheroes, which people try to, say superheroes are genre. Superheroes are characters that can fit into any genre. They can fit into horror. They can fit into rom-coms. You can make a goddamn workplace comedy with these characters. You can do whatever you want with these characters. It's just that Marvel has tricked people into thinking that they all fit into the same exact genre, which just isn't true. And if they were to branch out and do different things, you would no longer feel fatigued. And I feel the same thing about the multiverse. To me, it's not that we're getting so much of the multiverse, it's that it's being used in the most boring ways possible. And it's to set up crossovers and just have a bunch of different versions of characters interact with each other, when instead the multiverse should be used for both DC and Marvel, and DC is using it more effectively than Marvel, and because they're using it to just make not like movies that aren't canon to some connected universe. That way, DC going forward, they have said DC in the comics, and they're doing the same thing with the movies, have this thing called Elseworlds, which are stories outside the main universe. So that way they have their main comic books that take place all in the same world, and then they have comic books outside of that where they can do whatever they want because they aren't beholden to a specific universe and continuity. That is how the multiverse should be used. So I'm not tired of the multiverse. I'm tired of the way it's being used, and I think it's the same with everyone. They just don't understand that. So like the multiverse was used very sparingly in this show so far, and yeah, it's gonna come back again. Of course it will, but I doubt it's going to overtake everything in this show. Like Superman deals with wild stuff like that all the time. Literally, the biggest, baddest stuff that happens to the average superhero is just a Tuesday for Superman. So multiversal stuff for Superman is nothing, and it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, anything else about that episode before we get to the next one?
Nope, we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, so episode 8, Clark begins to get his super hearing, and being able to hear whenever someone or something bad is happening causes him to dash off to save people on a near constant basis. Running himself ragged, and I love how he's slowly getting each of his iconic abilities with episodes focused on them. Like he got the heat vision in like episode 3. When the people were using that giant ice beam to freeze stuff and rob banks. And in the end of this episode, he gets jumped and captured by Task Force X in a pretty cool action scene. Episode 9 was absolutely phenomenal. This version of Parasite is extremely cool in terms of design, despite the fact that I don't like that it's Dr. Ivo. I like that the suit becomes more kind of like a kaiju as he absorbs more power. And this isn't the first time Parasite has turned into a kaiju when he absorbs power. It was also done in the animated movie Superman: Man of Tomorrow. Yeah, we also see Jimmy and Lois leverage the hope that Superman inspires to get the entire city to help him take down Parasite by cutting off their power. And this is what Superman represents, hope and inspiration. Throughout the entire series, people in positions of power are afraid that Superman will abuse his power and use it to take over the world. And it clearly comes from a place of insecurity because the characters who think this are either multimillionaires like Ivo, who does abuse his power, or people who work for the government, which routinely abuses their power.
Right.
So, they're afraid that someone with even greater power than they have will also use it for evil, just like they do. And, this goes more so for Ivo and Waller than General Sam Lane, who's doing it out of fear of, another alien invasion, which is understandable.
Right.
Speaking of which, I'm very interested in learning more about this version of the Kryptonians. So I'm gonna give you what I guessed and wrote in my notes back when I first saw this episode, and then at the end I'm gonna tell you what my theory has changed to. So at the time, if I had to guess, the person flying and shooting lasers was Zod, who was attempting to escape a decaying Krypton and find a new home for his people, but the planet's explosion interrupted his invasion. But yeah, this type of stuff is again what I love about the series, like new takes on already extremely established things, like basic stuff that most people know about Superman, rather than having the tiny stuff that people don't really know about being changed drastically simply because they feel like they can do that because no one knows about it, even though, like I said 1,000 times, I think it should be the other way around. But yeah, moving on to the finale. Wait, what'd you think of that episode before I move to the finale? Because that was episode. Yeah, I was gonna say because that was probably one of the best episodes of the season. Let me not skip over what you think about it.
Yeah, that one was definitely my favorite. I enjoyed like the whole romp, and like I just loved it. I loved the last episode, even despite not knowing much about Superman. Like it felt so Superman. And again, I've established this every time we talked about my adventures on the podcast, but I was one of those people that was like, oh, Superman is boring because he's so powerful, but like this show and the final episode especially has like completely changed my opinion of him. And again, gotta get into those comics. My uncle has a whole bunch of them, and I'm gonna go bother him about it probably sometime within the next week to borrow some of his old comics to read them. He's gonna be so excited.
Good. Superman's great, and I'm glad people are learning that. Yeah, moving on to the finale, episode 10. It's Thanksgiving, and Lois and Jimmy are spending it with the Kents. And Lois has invited her father, who is the General. Of course, I knew this.
Yes.
It's basic knowledge if you've consumed enough Superman media. But if you haven't, you probably wouldn't know, and would be surprised. Even though I feel like they kind of was making it obvious that he was her father. But yeah, I don't think it was obvious enough that just anyone would notice off top without having some knowledge from other stuff. But after some awkwardness, Jimmy gets tired of being the mediator and forces Lois and Clark to reveal everything to each other, but mistakenly reveals the evil Superman sphere and exposes Clark to kryptonite, which also awakens the ship under the Kent farm, which is much bigger than I thought it would be, and is being controlled by Brainiac, as denoted by the 3 dots connected by lines, and is fully revealed at the end to be Brainiac when it says in the caption that it's Brainiac. I don't think Brainiac out loud says, "My name is Brainiac," or the person who he's talking to, who is obviously Zod, doesn't say, right, "I'm Zod and you're Brainiac." Like, they don't say these things, but it's very clear that's what's happening. And right, also, like I said, the caption calls Brainiac, but the caption does not call Zod, but I'm 100% certain it's Zod. But yeah, I knew it was Brainiac immediately because the 3 dots with the lines connected to them is just Brainiac's logo. Right. But yeah, my theory has changed. Well, it's not even a theory anymore. Now it's very clear that Zod and Brainiac are working together and are likely responsible for the destruction of Krypton and are attempting to invade Earth. But also, that's assuming Krypton is destroyed and not just under the control of Zod and Brainiac. Right. Which could very much be the case. But yeah, what were your thoughts on that finale?
like I said, I really enjoyed it. Again, missing the context of like all of the plot important stuff. I still enjoyed it a lot. Um, and I'm excited to see because like I know the very like baseline parts of Superman's backstory and whatnot. I do what you said about perhaps Krypton not being destroyed and being under control instead, which is very interesting to me concept wise, and I feel like I hope that's what they go with because like as Superman as I know him is from a dead planet. The planet Krypton is gone.
Yeah,
And it would be nice to see as a outsider to the whole Superman universe. It would be nice to see like Krypton, even if it's under the control. It's not how it was when Superman was there. I don't know. I'm very interested in that
yeah.
concept
The
wise.
only time I ever, the only reason I ever have a problem with that is because then it's like, okay, now we have a whole planet full of ungodly strong people.
Okay, real.
And I don't like that. But they could easily explain it by Superman was sent away literally not too long after he was born. He was a baby.
Hmm.
He was like at max probably like 1 years old, but less than that most likely. And he was sent away. Like the reason they don't have powers on their planet is because something that takes away their powers is red sun radiation, and they get their powers from yellow sun radiation. So
Right.
when they're under a red sun, which is the sun that's in their solar system, they don't have powers. Um, so the explanation could be since he was a baby and unlike everybody else, hasn't been long enough to absorb all of that red sun radiation, which they could say completely nullifies their powers after a certain period of time, like years upon
Right.
years of exposure, like all of those adults and teenagers on the planet would have gotten. So they could explain it that way. That's why they won't ever get powers, but Superman does have powers because he was there for like less than a year, then was sent away.
Right.
So they could come up with an explanation why every single Kryptonian doesn't have powers, and even come up with an explanation why maybe Zod does have powers.
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
maybe he found a way to reverse it or something, or maybe it's a one-time thing, or maybe he just because he is wearing a big robot suit in the end of the episode, so maybe he
Hmm.
doesn't have powers. And my theory is correct about the Red Sun taking away their powers after a couple of years, or their ability to absorb yellow sun radiation after a couple of years. So he has to use a mech suit to make himself stronger.
That'd be very
Um,
interesting.
but and you know, I promised I wouldn't do this, but I have to because I forgot to bring it
Mm.
up before. Bring up one more thing I don't like about the villains, but that's going to lead into something that I actually like about the villains being changed. That could be cool.
Right. Okay.
So, Heatwave is the lady, the redhead, big buff lady that shoots fire
Right.
out her
Right.
gauntlets. A lot of people are
Very
mad.
normal about her.
Yeah, I'm very normal about all buff women. Everyone knows this.
Yep. Yep.
But you know, some people are mad because she's like a gender bent version of the character. That doesn't matter. Doesn't I don't care about that. Heatwave
Right.
isn't super dependent upon being a man. But here's what makes it weird. Um, Heatwave is a Flash villain, and I forgot to mention this before.
Interesting.
Heatwave isn't just any old Flash villain. He's a relatively popular Flash villain. He's Heatwave is a core member of the Rogues, which is Flash's equivalent to Spider-Man's Sinister Six.
Right.
Um, he is a popular Flash villain. So making him and or her in this version, well, actually, I don't know their gender. They're you know for this version of that character, their origin depended on Superman and being you know surrounding Superman. Is like having Mr. Freeze start as a Wonder Woman villain. It makes no sense. Like, and
Yeah.
this honestly adds to the credence. I don't know if credence is the right word. I'm probably using that wrong word. This adds to my thought that these people don't really know a lot about Superman's villains. Because if you think after 80 years of existence, Superman doesn't have fire-based villains, multiple of them, you're insane. And again, them being gender swap doesn't bother me, but
Right.
Superman's most popular fire-based villain is literally a woman. They could have just given this character that character's name if they really wanted to use a fire villain. And her name is Volcana, to be clear. So if they really wanted, like, okay, we want it to be a woman and we want them to have fire powers, Superman's most famous fire villain is a woman with fire powers. Why?
Powers.
Why take one of the Flash's most popular villains and make them a Superman villain? Because I'm not like Heatwave. They're called Heatwave in the caption, in the credits. It's Heatwave. Heatwave is a Flash villain, goddammit. And unless this leads to the Flash showing up in Superman next season, why is Heatwave here? And I swear to God, it better lead to the Flash showing up next season because I love the Flash. Flash is my third favorite superhero of all time. So
Real?
I am truly upset that they decided to give a Flash villain to Superman when Superman has several fire-based villains and he already has a really popular woman fire villain. So this is just weird. Again, I'm calm down. I said I was going to talk about it and I did anyway, and then I got heated. No pun intended. So, now I'd like to talk about them in a more positive and hopeful note, in the spirit of Superman. So Livewire so far has been shown to just be an arms dealer, but at the end of episode 2, to spite Task Force X and the government, she gave away all the Kryptonian tech that she had for free before she got captured.
Right.
And I think that opens the door for Livewire to be more of a kind of like a anti-government punk anarchist in this series, which I think would be a very fun take on the character and could still be combined with her kind of shock jock really host personality by having her start like a conspiracy theorist podcast. And instead of her thriving on fake news and outrage and being a foil to Lois and Clark like she usually is, she could instead be, like I said, an anti-government conspiracy theorist who's a foil to Jimmy instead, and shows and shows what happens when a conspiracy theorist goes way too far, reinforcing the need for Jimmy to base his theories more on factual information rather than hearsay. Speaking of which, Jimmy sold Flamebear to the Daily Planet for $5.6 million.
And he's so real for that.
And I assume because he's still working there, of course, they just got promoted to being actual reporters rather than interns. I assume he'd still be the face of the brand. But now, under Perry's supervision, he'll probably be forced to work more on facts and evidence, like I mentioned before. Because Perry's big on that, being naturally the editor-in-chief of a newspaper.
Of course.
So yeah, of course I'm making that up, and to me that's just like a good way to take the version of Livewire that they've built and make her more interesting and bring her just a tad bit more in line with her original version, but without like creating like completely changing the character from the way that they've shown her to be so far. And obviously, like I said, just making that up, this could not happen, and I'll just continue to be upset about it. But I don't know. I'm kind of hopeful that maybe they do still have plans to maybe bring in some of that shock jock host into her character. Because to me, it's still it blows my mind that a character who works so much better in today than she did in the 90s as this person who thrives on outrage and all that, and they didn't go with that, is just strange to me. And it either again leads I don't know if credence is the right word to the fact that
it is.
I wasn't sure. I usually use words the right way, but have to Google it to be sure, and right now I can't just Google it. But yeah, like I said, that they probably don't really know much about these villains, which I hope isn't the case, because that would be very disappointing.
Yeah.
Like in between next season, people who make it My Adventure Superman, maybe go and read some more Superman comics. Maybe that's a little mean, but like.
No, you're real for that though.
But yeah, that's all I have on this show. It's great. It's good so far. Again, despite my complaints, I like it more than I dislike the things that I dislike about it. Oh, actually, one more thing before I wrap up. A way that I think they could bring Silver Banshee more in line with the comic book versions, like I said, she's a magical-based ghost Banshee character in the comics. A way they could make her more like that is there's this thing called the Phantom Zone projector. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a very important piece of technology in Superman's history. It's the equivalent of, there's an equivalent of it in something else that's popular that I can't remember. It's the Null Void from Ben 10. I couldn't remember, but it's the Null Void from Ben 10. Dang, why can't I remember it? Well, it's a prison realm, and it essentially creates a portal.
Jujutsu Kaisen.
No, that's not what I was thinking about.
Oh.
It's something far more popular than Jujutsu Kaisen that's been around for a while, but I can't remember what it is. Dang, I don't know why I can't remember it. There's something else very similar to the Phantom Realm in pop culture that I can't remember. It was probably based off the Phantom Realm too. But yeah, it's a projector that sends people to this prison realm where Krypton sends all their prisoners. And it would be cool if like Silver Banshee somehow and sticking with the whole Kryptonian technology thing, it'd be cool if Silver Banshee like got caught in an explosion with a Phantom Zone projector, and maybe that gives her the ability to like phase through walls and stuff like that. I think that would be cool,
Really
and that
cool.
would bring in more of that kind of like ghostly aspect to her character. So now she has the ability to scream. Like Livewire, I forgot to mention, now permanently has superpowers. It would be cool if she permanently gets the ability to scream and then is able to phase. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, just ways like I'm just thinking of ways to bring the character more in line with what I'm used to without completely changing what they've done with the character so far. Because what's done is done. All you can do now is kind of iterate on it and make them more interesting. But yeah, that's again all I have for my adventures with Superman. If you don't have anything,
Nope. I just really enjoyed it. Excited for the rest.
yep, we're an
Whenever that may happen.
yep, we're an hour in, and we've only talked about Superman and Ninja Turtles.
Oh
Like I
boy.
said, this is gonna be a long one.